Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be a weekly update. Really, it's kind of like a mid-month wrap-up for August, I guess. So I haven't been reading that much this month. Like you may have seen with that vlog that I posted earlier this week, I did go back to Arizona to visit my parents, so I didn't get the most amount of reading done, but I'm starting to kind of like pick things up again, I think. So anyway, I have 6 books to talk to you about today. Before we get started, leave a bird emoji of some sort in the comments to let me know that you're here. So like always, we'll move our way from the lowest to the highest rated. So we'll begin with some 3-star books. So the first 3-star book I'll talk about is Sphere by Michael Crichton. So this is an adult sci-fi thriller where basically a group of scientists are sent to investigate this alien ship that's been discovered in the ocean. So this was basically just not my favorite of his books. I think the pacing was still good overall. It's certainly quick and easy to read. He has a very simplistic type of writing, I think, and I didn't seem to remember that, I guess, or maybe this particular book seemed more simplistic compared to others. But you know, with it being so simple, it's like super easy to read. So I really liked this premise, and I think this like general underwater setting, and there are some elements in particular with this underwater setting that I just absolutely loved. There are, you know, certain sea creatures that pop up that I was like, yes, I'm totally here for this. I think it does help increase the tension, you know, being underwater, because you're kind of trapped here with few options to really escape. So I think there were some really tense moments. There were certainly some shocking moments that I didn't expect, but I'm not really sure I loved the direction it went in, and I think I would have maybe preferred something else. The main thing for me here as to why I didn't like it was I did not like any of the characters at all. I think they felt almost reduced to stereotypes. Like you've got this kind of insecure, angry feminist type character as just one example, and I just like think that it could have been handled in a much more nuanced way. I just basically found all of them to be pretty abrasive and in some cases condescending. Norman, our main character, is kind of, I think, a bit of a know-it-all. He's the psychologist, and so he kind of analyzes people and, like, seeing, you know, is their behavior concerning, especially that, since we're, you know, trapped underwater together. So I think he was mildly better than the others, but I still didn't love him. So basically, like, I just don't feel like any of them were particularly well-developed enough for me to care about them, or, you know, in some cases, some of them were maybe killed off, and I was like, okay. So yeah, I think overall, like, it was still enjoyable, and there were some things that were really cool, but it just wasn't my favorite of his books. You know, that being said, would I still recommend it? Yeah, I don't know if this is something I would reread. I think it was a fun summer read just to, you know, like, have some sort of like crazy sci-fi thriller, but I would probably suggest borrowing it from the library if possible, or getting it used or something. Like, yeah, something that I'm not going to reread. So then the other 3-star book I'll talk about is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah. So I actually picked this up used, which is why it's the Book of the Month copy. But anyway, this is the July book, I think, for Space Sirens Book Club that's going to be discussed in August. I think actually the same weekend I post this video, so I guess if you want a more detailed discussion with us, feel free to look at our channel. But this is an adult sci-fi book where people can essentially travel to other worlds in the multiverse only if their counterpart there is dead. So we follow Kara, who is one of these travelers, and her parallel selves are good at dying. So basically, one of her 8 remaining doppelgangers dies mysteriously, and so Kara is plunged into a new world with an old secret and learns of a plot that could endanger the entire multiverse. So I will say the main thing for me here is this is not at all what I expected based on that plot. Like, I guess I had heard some people kind of mention like what it was about and just apparently completely forgot all of that, but I thought the pacing was so much slower than I had expected. Like, I kind of thought it would be a really fast-paced journey through the multiverse with like a different plot, I guess, to destroy the multiverse than the things that ended up happening. So I think one of the big reasons why I rated this 3 stars is the pacing. Like, I struggled to get through it. It is not a particularly long book, but like, I think the first half I was like, this is not at all what I wanted. And then I had actually taken a break for like a week and a half because I left this behind when I went to Arizona. and came back to it after, I got back to North Carolina. And I think that break did help me get back into it a bit more. It does pick up in the second half, but like at the same time, I still found myself like checking the pages like, dear God, how much do I have left? So anyway, yeah, pacing is pretty slow overall, I think. It's also, with the first half, it's much more focused on things like gangs. I just didn't love this focus very much. Like I said, the second half does pick up more, and I think you do get more action, but it's still just a little bit uneven for me. I think this is much more of a commentary on the different social classes than I had necessarily expected. So, I think maybe I just came in with completely the wrong idea of what would happen here. Again, just thinking it'd be more faster paced and more focused on this multiverse and traveling. So, I don't know. I do like this general idea of travel across the multiverse, though. There are some pretty horrific consequences sometimes, and I think that was, an interesting idea to explore. I will say I was confused about the limited number of worlds that you can travel to, and I think this was kind of explained in the book, but I don't know how satisfied I am necessarily with that. In terms of the characters, Kara, I think I initially didn't like her very much, but she did kind of grow on me more as the book progressed, and as we learn more things about her. She's really mysterious at first, and I think learning the secrets behind her and like why she acts the way she does, like that was really helpful for me to get to know her and like her more. I also really enjoyed learning about her counterparts on some of these different worlds, and how Kara herself interacts with other people's counterparts on the different worlds. I particularly enjoyed her relationship with her sister and seeing how this develops over the book. Kara, I think, is possibly bi. She's not labeled, but she's at least that, I think, just because we do see her be interested, I guess, in both men and women. So some of the other characters, we have Dell, who I think is like Kara's watcher. So she kind of is in control or like overseeing Kara's travel to the other worlds. So I think she's initially standoffish, but I did grow to like her more as, again, we discover more things about her. We have Nick, who is the Emperor. He's really violent, and I think it was particularly interesting to see his different layers with some of his other counterparts. Overall, I think I did like the themes of family and friendship here. Kara kind of starts off being alone, but then I think realizes just how important these bonds are. I do feel undecided about the ending. I think it felt a bit rushed, especially compared to the pacing of the rest of the book. It feels different, like tonally speaking, I guess, than I would have expected, and I'm not really sure how to feel about that. So overall, this was not at all what I expected. I still liked it, but not nearly as much as I had hoped for. So this is another one, like, I don't think I'm going to reread this, but I do know people who really loved it, so I think it's still worth checking out. So then we'll move to a 3.5-star book, and that's The Lion's Den by Katherine St. John. So this is an adult thriller where Belle is invited by her best friend Summer to join this glamorous getaway on Summer's boyfriend's yacht. But it turns out, this dream vacation turns into a nightmare as the guests are treated more like prisoners. So I think this was mostly fast-paced, but I will say I did end up guessing everything that ended up happening. However, that being said, like, that happened as, I was reading the book, so it wasn't like I was immediately able to guess everything. Like, I put together pieces that were presented to me and, like, formulated these guesses that did turn out to be right. So I wasn't terribly mad, I think, about being able to pick out these plot elements because I felt rewarded, I guess, for, like, picking up on stuff. I did like this overall sort of ominous setting of knowing something is not quite right on this boat and with these people. This was also great to read in the summer because of this boat setting and just like the general destination, where all they're going. I really enjoyed the atmosphere. It does feel like we are on a boat, and I liked the trips off of the island. It's like a very glamorous time, I guess. So it was fun to see those settings. We do have two timelines here. So we have the present and then the past, but the past is leading up to the present. So I think this was really nice because we do get to see how Belle and Summer's friendship has changed over time. The characters, however, are mostly unlikable here, and they're not meant to be likable, so that's totally fine. They're like the rich elite and gold digger types, so, it's a lot of people who just want money and attention. Belle, I think, is the most sympathetic of all of them. She actually seems nice, though I will say I did get really irritated with her because she lets all these people walk all over her. I think she's really quick to accept blame and rationalize other people's behavior, and, now kind of looking back at it, I'm not sure if that was just an act or if that's like how she truly is, but it did get to be a little irritating at times. In terms of the other characters, like I said, they are very unlikable, but it's still kind of just fun to see what all they get into. Summer, is previously a good friend, but she's changed. I think she's really manipulative and materialistic. I also really enjoyed one of the other side characters, Amethyst. She seems like one of the more genuine characters. She's definitely out there with her attitude and style. I think she's really unapologetically herself, and this certainly clashes with Summer's style. John, who is Summer's boyfriend, is definitely a creeper, and you can immediately tell that he's into some shady stuff and just isn't a nice guy. So, overall, I am glad that I read this. I was very nervous about it because I think there's a lot of mixed reviews, but I'm just, generally happy with the overall story and the direction it went. I had a good time with it. I will say there are some content warnings here for attempted rape, and there's a lot of talk about, vomiting and being seasick. It did make me feel a little meh to read about, how Belle was struggling with feeling ill and whatnot, so I'll just point that out, I guess. But yeah, overall, I had a good time with this. I would certainly recommend it, and especially, if you're interested in reading about, terrible people doing terrible things, it was a good time. So now we'll move into the 4-star books, and the first one I'll talk about is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. So this is an adult thriller where years ago at summer camp, 3 girls vanished, and Emma was left behind. So now Emma is a painter, and the owner of this camp asked her to kind of come back to camp as a painting instructor. So Emma agrees to this because she wants to find out what happened years ago to her friends, but, things are not quite right at this camp. So this was really fun. It's very fast-paced overall and did keep me guessing. I really liked this atmosphere. It definitely feels like a summer camp, and I think it's perfect to read right now during the summer. There's a lot of really interesting elements and mysteries going on. There's certainly, I think, some things that I did not predict at all. I enjoyed the use of dual timelines here with the past and the present. I liked how we, gradually get clues about what happened, and it did, like I said, it did fool me a bit. I had all sorts of crazy hypotheses that did not turn out to be right at all, but it was fun. In terms of the characters, Emma, our main character, is mostly sympathetic. I think she does blame herself for things that weren't really her fault, and so this is kind of frustrating to deal with. It's the same thing, actually, as something that happened in one of the other books that I'll talk about momentarily, but it's girl, you were a kid, this is not your fault, I don't know. I just got frustrated with her taking the blame for this, and I'm but no. I liked seeing her kind of work through her trauma and try to get back to leading a healthy, normal life. The family who owns the camp, I think some of them are rather mysterious and some of them are maybe possibly nefarious. So we'll just leave it at that. But I definitely had a lot of theories about them. In terms of the other camp counselors, I also thought some of them seemed shady, and basically, this just goes to show that I pretty much suspected everybody at one point. I also really liked the current day campers. They're, very different girls with very different interests, but I like seeing them kind of bond together to help Emma. The former campers, however, this trio is definitely much more on the manipulative side. Vivian in particular, we definitely get this Mean Girls type of vibe here. So, generally speaking, I think that Riley Sager did an excellent job of portraying teenage girls, and I liked the discussions of mental health throughout. The third book, I guess now, by Riley Sager that I've read, I think I've rated them all 4 stars, so clearly whatever he's doing works really well for me. So I would definitely recommend picking this one up, especially right now when you have these summer camp type vibes. I think it is perfect to read, in terms of the atmosphere. The next 4-star book I'll talk about is Where the Waters Turn Black by Benedict Patrick. So this is an adult fantasy where Kaimana, who is an ocarina player, discovers a Taniwa, which is essentially a legendary monster. She's inspired by their encounter, but disturbing the beast attracts the attention of the god of war. So she must join forces with this Taniwa for both of them to survive. So this was a really great story. It's actually inspired by real myths and legends. I think the author's note had mentioned that they were from New Zealand. A lot of these did remind me of some legends that I know from Hawaii. I'm assuming that there's probably a bit of overlap there, but anyway, I thought this was really rich in folklore, and I like seeing, I think, the similarities and changes to these real myths and legends. The pacing is pretty good overall. I think it starts off pretty quickly, with encountering this Taniwa, and from there it really escalates into this epic story involving the gods. I like the reference to the previous book in the series with these birdmen, like, the Magpie King and the Owl Queen. I think it really helps tie the universe together. I also like how there are many myths and legends like embedded within the book between some chapters. I think a lot of these often involve something relevant to the story that's, to come, but I think they felt like actual myths and legends, and they're done exceedingly well. I just absolutely loved these, though, of course I also loved the main story. I think there's some interesting magic here. Basically, people have these different knacks for things, and they spark with like inspiration, and these kind of enhance their powers to help them, accomplish a task. So this was really cool to see how this would work for a musician in particular. It's basically like, oh, you're inspired to write a song, perhaps. So this was really, really neat. In terms of the characters, I liked following Kaimana a lot. She, I think, wants to pursue her own dreams instead of following this, prescribed path for her. She doesn't always listen to others, but I think she kind of does what she wants to do and what she thinks is best with kind of mixed results. She does start off, I thought, a bit selfish, but I think she realizes that things like friendship are much more important, and I really liked her journey throughout the book. I think she has a very lovely bond with this Taniwa. I just absolutely adored it, and I think this really helps her discover a new well of strength within herself. I also, just as a side note, really liked that she was an ocarina player. That was something that I haven't really seen in books before, and I was like, oh, that's a really fun touch. So this monster, this Taniwa, was awesome. I always love a good animal companion, of course, but it was really cool that he was a monster. He's kind of like a giant dog, otter type character, but I think it's super fun because, like, right now I'm kind of playing Monster Hunter Stories too, and you get to, like, ride on various, like, monsters and stuff. So, like, it was just, like, perfect in terms of, what I'm doing outside of reading books, I guess. Like, it just was the perfect storm of things that worked really well for me. But anyway, even though this monster does not really speak, I think he is still able to communicate. And again, I just loved this bond. It is very special, and I just absolutely adored it. I also really loved the involvement of the gods here. I think we have a variety with like smaller and bigger players. Some of them are definitely very selfish, but I particularly liked Yam, who is the god of yams. I think he is sort of bumbling, grumpy, and sassy, but I really liked seeing him try to do and be more, and I think seeing Kaimana and her bond with this monster kind of inspires him to be better as well. So all those things that, like, I had a really great time with this. It's the second book in this series that I've read so far. Even though I think I rated them the same on Goodreads, I think I preferred this one just because of this setting. But yeah, it's something, like, I definitely want to continue this series. I really like how these myths and legends are sort of involved here. It's a very, like, folkloric sort of feel to it. If you're looking for that sort of quality, I would definitely suggest picking this series up, in particular this book. I don't think you really need to have read the first one in order to enjoy this one, but it is fun to, pick up on, like I said, some of the elements here that reference, at least the first book. So the last book I'll talk about today is also a 4-star book, and that's Forestborn by Elayne Audrey Becker. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out August 31st. So this is a YA fantasy where Rora, who is a shifter, she's a spy for the king and is feared for her magic. There's a magical illness that's surfacing across the kingdom, and the prince, who is Rora's friend, catches it. So his only hope to survive is stardust, which is exceedingly rare and is only found in the wilderness. So Rora, her brother, and the older prince journey to get it. So I liked this overall, but I think the pacing was a little bit off for me. It did take me a bit to get into the story, but, once they start actually, journeying throughout the wilderness, that's when I got really invested. The first part is definitely slower. I do feel okay with the overall story arc. You can definitely tell it's setting up a series. I think it's a duology, could be wrong about that, but I feel mostly satisfied and interested with where it ends up. I kind of thought we would get a little bit more in terms of the overall story arc, but it ends in a place where I'm like, okay, there is definitely more to this story to be told, but I really want to know what happens next, so I will certainly pick up the next book. The world building was fantastic here. We have several kingdoms, some of which don't really accept magic. We have this interesting magical plague element, and we get to learn about the disease itself as well as its origins. I thought this was very cool and well done. I think we have a fun variety of magical beings. Obviously, we mostly focused on the shifters, with Aurora and her brother being shifters. So basically here, each shifter has 3 different types of animals that they can shift into, but there's like unlimited human shifting. And I think there are some really interesting constraints here. And I thought these abilities were well explained and just very well thought out. We do encounter some other magical beings here, but I don't think their powers are really as much of the focus here, at least for now. Like, perhaps we'll learn more about them in the next book. I really liked the different types of magical creatures here. I think it's really inventive, and I really liked learning about them. For example, we've got some marrow sheep, which are basically like scavenger sheep that eat bones, which I was like, oh boy, that's a little bit dark, okay. And then we also have these like big cats, like cougars essentially, that can hypnotize you. So I don't want to mention all of them because it's fun to discover them, but I thought all of these were super fun and I really liked learning about them. And yeah, I really liked seeing their journey throughout the wilderness because you get like almost a lesson on survival in this world and you get a whole bunch of really cool details and it's like a very rich environment. So I loved that part. In terms of the characters, I thought Rora was a good main character overall, though I did get frustrated with her thinking that she's really selfish because of things that happened in the past. You know, I think she idolizes her brother a bit, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it does take her a while to see that he's human. Well, you know, that being, like, he's a shifter, but, like, in terms of his flaws, like, he's human. So I really liked seeing her journey. I think she wants to be useful and like fix herself to be more selfless like her brother. And I think her journey is really great. She does have to deal with trauma and PTSD along the way, and this felt really realistically portrayed. So while I did get frustrated with her at times for, you know, like this feeling selfish situation, I think her character arc was really great, and I do really like her, you know, especially at the end of this book. In terms of some of the other characters, we have Helos, who is her older brother. He's a healer, and I think he seems protective and good overall, though he does have his secrets. I really liked seeing their sibling bond. I think, you know, they've obviously helped each other survive, but there could be like conflict and resentment building up in certain areas. And then, you know, let's mention Westlin, who is the prince. I think he seems grumpy and kind of aloof at first, so I really liked getting to know him more. I think he seems to want to learn, and he also wants to do what's best for his country. So we do have, you know, a slow burn romance developing here, which I am totally here for this relationship, and hopefully there is another one that can be repaired. I'm very intrigued by that one. We do have some hints of a male-male romance. Like, at least, you know, even if that doesn't necessarily happen, this male-male, like, relationship is very accepted in this country, so it feels pretty inclusive. One other thing that I want to note here is this definitely has a much darker tone than I expected. Like, I really appreciate this, especially for a YA. Like, it takes some risks and, like, goes there, and I was definitely here for that. But I do want to specifically mention some content warnings. Like I said, we do have trauma and PTSD, but there are also things like genocide and these sort of, like, death camp settings, and this got a lot more graphic than I had expected. So I really want to point that out because I think that could be perhaps triggering for some people. But overall, I thought this was a really great book, and I definitely want to see, you know, where this journey leads in the next one. So I'll, you know, for sure be picking that up. So I would highly recommend this. Again, be aware of the content warnings, but I think this had a really exciting world that I want to know more about. So with that, those are all the books that I have to talk to you about today. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. And for your question of the day, I don't know, I can't think of anything to go off of these books, but what have you been reading, I guess, that you've enjoyed lately? So I do have a Discord channel, and if you want to join that, the link's in the description below. I hope you're all having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.